Lin Xiaoqing stood in front of the glass door of Xingchen Technology Building, looked up at the building that was soaking in the sky, and felt both excited and tight. At 8:30 in the morning, the sun shone a dazzling light through the glass curtain wall, as if it was covered with a layer of golden armor on this building. She glanced down at the time on her phone, confirmed that she had arrived 10 minutes earlier, then took a deep breath and pushed the heavy rotary door open. Today is her first day at work. As a marketing assistant, she officially joined this 1 to 2 year-old technology company in Taiwan. She told herself that she would leave a good impression no matter what. The air conditioning in the building made people feel a little cold. The white marble floor under the feet was shining. The employees coming were in a hurry, wearing a body and carrying a tactile snail on their faces. Xiaoqing was wearing a simple white shirt and a narrow black skirt, holding a black briefcase in her hand, and she was wearing her notebook computer and several information she had sorted out last night. She stood at the elevator entrance, waiting to go to the marketing department on the 18th floor. A few men wearing ties were talking in low voices about the data model and project progress. She could not understand it, so she could only wear it and look at the numbers on the elevator display screen. The elevator door opened with a ding sound, and Xiaoqing followed the crowd and rushed in. The atmosphere in the elevator was a little depressed. No one said that, only the occasional phone notification sound broke the silence. She secretly looked at the people around her and found that most of them were looking down at their phones or staring at the digital changes above the elevator door, as if they were completely immersed in their own world. Xiaoqing muttered in her heart, "Is this the atmosphere of a large company? I feel like everyone is running, and I don't have time to catch my breath." When I arrived at the 18th floor, Xiaoqing walked out of the elevator and came to the spacious and bright office area. The entire area is divided into several small teams by glass partitions, each of which is filled with people, and various data charts and simplified pages are flashed on the computer screen. The air was filled with a faint aroma of coffee, mixed with the sound of keyboard knocking and low-sounding conversation, forming a wonderful rhythm. She stood at the entrance, a little overwhelmed until a woman in a beige suit left and greeted her with a smile. "You are Lin Xiaoqing, right? I am Chen Manlin, a project agent in the marketing department. Today I am responsible for bringing you familiar with the environment." The woman's voice was gentle, and the smile on her face made people feel like spring. Xiaoqing was busy and showed a somewhat restrained smile. "Yes, I am Xiaoqing. It's a nuisance to you, Sister Manlin." Chen Manlin raised her hand and signaled her not to be polite. Then she took her through rows of workstations and walked along the way to introduce, "Our marketing department is mainly responsible for the company's product promotion and market analysis. She has been busy with an AI application project recently, which has a bit of pressure, so everyone seems to be quite serious. Don't mind, just be polite." Xiaoqing was a little bit angry, and her eyes looked at her colleagues who were working in the head, and she was both curious and a little nervous. She noticed that several people looked up at her, with exploration in their eyes, but soon lowered their heads and continued to work on their own affairs. Manlin took her to a window-by-window workstation, pointed to the famous brand on the table and said, "This is your location. The account password of the computer and internal system have been set. If you don't know anything, you can ask me any time." Xiaoqing put down her bag and looked around her, and found that next to her station was a huge floor-to-ceiling window that could overlook the entire city's skyline. The scenery made her feel a little relaxed. She turned to Manlin and said, "Thank you, Sister Manlin. I will get started as soon as possible and not cause any trouble for everyone." Manlin smiled and patted her on the shoulder. "Don't be too tight, as a newcomer, come slowly. But I have to remind you that our department's supervisor, Zhang Yifan, has high requirements. You have to cheer up when you see him." Speaking of this, she whispered a low voice, as if sharing some little secret, "Super Zhang is a tough guy, with strong abilities, but not a little temper. You do things carefully and don't make mistakes in front of him." Xiaoqing felt a little nervous. After a little bit of his head, she began to imagine what kind of person Zhang Yifan was. Manlin saw her face as if she was really good, and couldn't help laughing. "Okay, don't scare yourself first. There is a department meeting at Jiuzhang. You can prepare for it and go with me." After saying that, she turned around and walked back to her workstation, leaving Xiaoqing alone in her seat, and began to organize her thoughts. She opened her computer, logged into the company's internal system, and found that there were several emails in her inbox, one of which was a job notice issued by the Human Resources Department, and the other was posted by Zhang Yifan, which required all department members to submit a work report last week before the meeting. Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, thinking that she had just arrived. How could she submit any report? She hesitated for a moment, and decided to check out other emails first and try to get familiar with the workflow of the office. At 9 o'clock, the meeting room was full of people. Xiaoqing followed Manlin in, found a back seat and sat down, lowered her head and pretended to organize the notebook in her hand, and actually secretly observed the people around her. In the center of the meeting room is a long black conference table, with a notebook, computer and coffee cup on the table, and the atmosphere is a bit solemn. A man sitting in the main seat attracted her attention. He was wearing a dark blue suit and a pair of gold-framed glasses. He was expressionless on his face, and was looking down at the documents in his hand. His aura was so strong that people dare not look at it directly. Xiaoqing guessed in her heart that this should be the Zhang Yifan that Manlin said. Sure enough, Manlin said in a slight voice in her ear, "That's Manager Zhang, I'll talk about it later." Xiaoqing was a little bit, and his heartbeat couldn't help but speed up a few points. She noticed a young man sitting opposite Zhang Yifan, wearing a white shirt, his mouth was slightly open, and a confident smile was on his face. He was talking to the person beside him in a low voice, and he smiled lightly from time to time, looking particularly relaxed. Xiaoqing was curious about who he was, and Manlin came over to the novel and said, "That's Wang Haoren, who joined the job at the same time as you, and is responsible for another group. He has a good background and has heard that there is a little relationship at home, so it's very important to come in." After hearing this, I felt a little uncomfortable. She knew that the competition on the job site was always around, but she didn't expect that she could feel this invisible pressure on the first day. She looked down at her notebook and told herself not to think too much, and to do the things in front of her first. The meeting began. Zhang Yifan raised his head and glanced at everyone on the scene. His voice was low and powerful. "Today is mainly two things. First, introduce new colleagues. Second, discuss the preliminary planning of the next quarterly AI project." His eyes stopped on Xiaoqing for a few seconds, and then clicked. "Lin Xiaoqing, get up and introduce yourself." Xiaoqing panicked and stood up quickly, her palms were already sweating. She cleared her throat and made her voice sound calm. "Hello everyone, I am Lin Xiaoqing. Today I just joined the marketing department and served as a marketing assistant. I graduated from National Taiwan University, majoring in business management, and specializing in data analysis. I hope to learn with everyone and achieve the goal of the department together. Thank you." After saying that, she sat down quickly and felt a little burning on her face. Zhang Yifan said nothing more, but just said simply, "I hope you can integrate into the team as soon as possible." His temperament was plain, but Xiaoqing always felt a look in his eyes, which made her feel a little uncomfortable. Then, Wang Haoren also stood up to introduce himself. His words were relaxed and confident. A few words made the people present laugh, and the atmosphere became much more harmonious in an instant. Xiaoqing looked at his talking, and couldn't help but feel a little envy. At the same time, she also made up her mind that she could never give it to him. The second half of the meeting focused on the AI project. Zhang Yifan began to assign tasks. His vocals were unquestionable. "This project is the company's top priority this year. It involves large-scale data applications and market forecasts. Each group has to come up with the best solution. Lin Xiaoqing, although you are a newcomer, since you have entered this department, there is no reason to drag your legs. You join Wang Haoren's group and are responsible for data sorting and preliminary analysis. The specific requirements are that I will send it to your email." Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, but she didn't expect to be arranged into the core project on the first day. She pointed her head, although she felt a little stressed, but she also felt that this was a good opportunity to show herself. However, after hearing this arrangement, Wang Haoren turned his head and looked at her, and the corner of his mouth slightly raised, as if he was carrying a zipper. Xiaoqing's heart sank, believing that this cooperation might not be too smooth. After the meeting ended, Xiaoqing returned to her workstation and was still digesting what she had just said. She opened her email and saw the detailed tasks posted by Zhang Yifan. The requirements listed in it were complex and specific, which obviously could not be completed in a simple and convenient way. She rubbed her son's pussy and felt that the challenge on the first day was bigger than she thought. Just as she was about to start sorting out the data, Wang Haoren walked over, leaned against her partition, and smiled and said, "New colleague, do you hear that you are good at long-term data analysis? You have to show it well, our group will not be careless." Xiaoqing looked at him with her head and smiled reluctantly. "Don't worry, I will do as much as possible." Her words were calm, but she was already a little unhappy. Although Wang Haoren's attitude seemed harmonious, there was a high-level smell outside the words, which made her feel uncomfortable. "Okay, then I'll wait and see your results." Wang Haoren turned around and walked away, leaving Xiaoqing sitting alone in his seat, holding the pen in his hand tightly. She knew that this was just the beginning of the competition, and the real challenge was still at the forefront. During the lunch break, Xiaoqing followed Manlin to eat at the restaurant under the company building. The restaurant environment is good, the lighting is good, and the dishes are rich, but Xiaoqing's attention is not at all about the food. She lowered her head and asked Manlin in a low voice, "Sister Manlin, what kind of person do you think Manager Zhang is? I always think his eyes look at people are particularly cold." Manlin took a bite of the sandwich and smiled. "Zhang Yifan, that's what he is like. On the surface, it doesn't seem easy to deal with, but in fact he has strong abilities. Many people in the company admire him, and of course some people blame him for being too harsh. Don't care too much, he is like everyone, not to you." It was a little clear, but I was still a little uneasy. She asked again, "What about Wang Haoren? He looks quite confident, but he always feels a little, it's hard to deal with." Manlin raised her eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Haoren has a good background. She has been in a prosperous life shortly after entering the company. But he is too confident and sometimes offends people. When you work with him, remember to be more careful and don't say anything, do you understand?" After hearing the sound of the sun, I thought about the point of the head. She knew that Manlin was reminding herself, but she was still a little confused. The rules of the job are much more complicated than she imagined. Everyone seems to have their own calculations, and she doesn't know if she can handle it. The afternoon work was even busier, and I was buried in the data table to try to sort out the background information of the project. Her brain is full of numbers and analytical models. She occasionally raises her head and looks at the scenery outside the window and tries to solve the pressure. At this moment, Zhang Yifan suddenly walked to her workstation and said in a low voice, "Lin Xiaoqing, come to my office." Xiaoqing was shocked, so she stood up and followed him into a glass office that was far away. The decoration in the office is simple and cold, with a large black table, several file cabinets, and an abstract painting hanging on the wall, which looks like there is no warm feeling. After Zhang Yifan sat down, he pointed to the chair opposite, "Sit." Xiaoqing sat down carefully, put her hand on her knees, waiting for him to open her mouth. Zhang Yifan pushed the eyeglasses. His temperament was dull, but he felt a sense of pressure. "I saw your performance. Data analysis is your strength, and this is also the reason why I arranged you into an AI project. But I have to remind you that this project not only tests your ability, but also tests your attitude. The company does not lack smart people, but people who can withstand pressure. Do you understand what I mean?" Xiaoqing was a little clear, and the sound was a little tight. "I understand. I will do my best and not disappoint you." Zhang Yifan stared at her for a few seconds, and there seemed to be something hidden in her eyes that she couldn't see through. Finally, he just clicked, "Okay, go back to work. Work overtime tonight to sort out the preliminary data. I will see the report tomorrow morning." When Xiaoqing walked out of the office, she felt a little turbulent on her back. When she returned to the workstation, her brain was still recalling Zhang Yifan's words. She felt that it was too stressful and there was still a recognized excitement. She knew that this job would not be easy, but she was determined to prove herself. In the evening, the people in the office kept leaving, but Xiaoqing was still sitting in her seat, and the light from the screen reflected on her face, looking a little tired. She rubbed her eyes, continued to knock on the keyboard, and tried to complete the report that Zhang Yifan explained. The sky outside the window became darker, and the city light began to light up, reflecting her lonely figure. At this moment, Chen Manlin left, holding a cup of coffee in her hand, and said with a smile, "Are you not leaving yet?" The passion of the newcomer is indeed different. Xiaoqing raised her head and smiled reluctantly. "Sister Manlin, Supervisor Zhang asked me to finish the report tonight. I am afraid I will not be able to hand it over tomorrow." Manlin clicked the head and put the coffee on her desk, drinking some to refresh yourself. "Don't be too hard, the body is important." She decided to do it and added, "Yes, I heard that this AI project is not simple, it involves several high-level factions in the company. Be careful when you do things and don't make mistakes." Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, but she didn't expect that there were so many doors behind a project. She sniffed her head and said thank you and felt a little uneasy. Faction? High level? These words were too strange to her, but she felt that she seemed to have been rolled into an unseen storm. The night became deeper and deeper, and there were only a few people working overtime in the office. Xiaoqing finally completed the report and sent it to Zhang Yifan's email. She leaned against the back of the chair and vomited a long time, but it was still a mess in her brain. She felt the pressure of her job on the first day at work, and all this seemed to have just begun. It was already dark, and the lights were still lit in the office of the 18th floor of Star Technology Building, which looked a little deserted. Lin Xiaoqing rubbed her sore eyes and glanced at the lower right corner of the computer. It was almost 10 o'clock. She stretched out her waist and felt her shoulders stiff as a stone. She just sent a report to Zhang Yifan to exhaust her last bit of energy. She stood up and walked to the window, overlooking the night view of the city. The lights of thousands of homes flashed under her feet, making her heart even more empty. She was already surrounded by various pressures when she went to work on her first day. She really didn't dare to think about what kind of days she would be. "Are you leaving?" A familiar voice came from behind. Xiaoqing turned around and saw that it was Chen Manlin. She was wearing a beige coat and a small bag in her hand, and she was obviously ready to get off work. Xiaoqing smiled hard and pointed, "I just posted the report and wanted to take a break before leaving." "Sister Manlin, why are you so late?" Manlin walked to her shoulders, walked to her and looked out the window. "I have many projects recently, and I have been busy with work. But you, as a newcomer, worked overtime until this night on the first day, and it was quite hard." She turned her head and looked at Xiaoqing, with a slight exploration in her eyes. "What's the report of Manager Zhang? He didn't pick it up, right?" Xiaoqing was fucking her head, and there was a hint of exhaustion in her language. "I haven't received a reply yet. I guess he's off work long ago. I hope he won't be criticized too much tomorrow." She decided to do it, remembering the faction topic that Manlin mentioned before, and couldn't help asking, "Sister Manlin, what does the faction you said before mean? Is there really so many AI project?" When Manlin heard this, the smile on her face was taken in a few points. She said in a low voice, "Xiqing, the less you know about some things now, the better. But I would like to remind you that the company is big, and there are all kinds of people. On the surface, it is not simple. This AI project is not just about our department. The big bosses on it all have their own plans. When you do things, don't be too tactful, and don't trust too easily." After saying that, she patted Xiaoqing on the shoulder. "Okay, don't think too much, go home early to rest, there will be tough battles to fight tomorrow." It was a little clear, and it seemed like a stone was pressed down in my heart, heavy. She looked at Manlin's leaving behind her back, and her brain was full of doubts. Faction? Big boss? These words were too far away to her, but they were like an invisible net that made her feel uneasy. She packed up her things, turned off her computer, and dragged her tired body out of the office. There was no one in the elevator, only her reflection was reflected on the smooth steel plate, looking a little lonely. In the next few days, Xiaoqing gradually adapted to the high-pressure rhythm of Xingchen technology. He went out early and went to bed late every day, and almost didn't have time to catch his breath. Zhang Yifan was staring at the progress of the AI project very tightly. Every 2 days there was a small group meeting, and the team where Wang Haoren was located became the focus of her work. Although she was responsible for data sorting and preliminary analysis, Haoren's attitude always made her feel uncomfortable. Every time he assigned a task, he always smiled and said something like "New colleagues learn more and don't drag their back legs." On the surface, it seemed like a joke, but the thorn outside the words made Xiaoqing feel very upset. That morning, Xiaoqing was burying her head in the workstation to sort out a set of market data. The screen was filled with dense numbers and charts. Her fingers were quickly tapping on the keyboard, trying to complete this report before noon. At this moment, Wang Haoren walked over, leaned against her partition, holding a cup of coffee in her hand, and said with a smile, "Xiqing, what's the data? Our group will open an internal discussion in the afternoon. Don't let me lose my face." Xiaoqing raised her head and smiled hard. "It's almost done, there should be no problem." Her words were calm, but she was already a little impatient. Haoren always likes to speak in such a high-ranking tone, as if she was born to be pressured by him. "Okay, then I'll wait and see your performance." Haoren said with a sip of coffee, and added casually, "Yes, I heard that Superintendent Zhang was quite satisfied with your first report, and said that you had 2 data analysis. However, the job site is not just about technology to eat, it is also important to come. Do you understand what I mean?" Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, but she didn't expect that he would suddenly say these things. She pointed and replied perfunctorily, "Well, I will work hard." Haoren saw that her reaction was mediocre and didn't say much, so she turned around and left. Xiaoqing looked at the screen with his head low, and his heart was a little confused. She knew Haoren was trying to find her, and might even remind her of the importance of the station team, but she actually didn't like this kind of rude way of speaking. During the lunch break, Xiaoqing and Manlin were having a meal at the company restaurant. She briefly said Haoren's attitude and couldn't help complaining, "Sister Manlin, I really don't understand Wang Haoren. I speak very well, but I always think he is talking to me. I just want to do things well, why is that difficult?" Manlin took a bite of the salad and smiled, "Xiqing, this is the job market, and competition is everywhere. Haoren is a little confident, but he is not completely tempted to you. He may just want to try your bottom line, depending on whether you can handle it. Don't be too concerned and be yourself." She said, "But I heard that Haoren has been very close to a manager in the technology department recently, and probably wants to make more good use of AI projects. When you work with him, be careful and don't let him lose all his money." After hearing the sound of the sun, my heart sank. She sniffed her head and said, "I understand," but her brain started to count. This project is already very stressful. If Haoren is really like what Manlin said, she would have to be careful not to let her hard work give it to others for nothing. The afternoon group meeting was held as scheduled. There were 7 or 8 people sitting in the conference room. Wang Haoren sat in the main seat and opened the venue with a relaxed temperament. "Hello everyone, today we are mainly discussing the market forecast part of the AI project. The data analysis that Xiaoqing is responsible for is the focus. Everyone listens to her report and see what can be supplemented." Xiaoqing felt nervous, stood up, took the notebook computer and connected it to the projector, and began to explain the data she had sorted out. Her voice was a bit tight, but the content was clearly sorted out, and she told it step by step from user behavior analysis to market trend prediction. The chart on the screen changed with her explanation, and everyone in the conference room kept their heads down and occasionally pointed to express their agreement. Halfway through Xiaoqing's speech, she secretly glanced at Haoren and found that he was holding his chin, with an unknown smile on her face, which made her feel a little hairy. After the lecture, Xiaoqing sat back to her seat, waiting for everyone's comments. Haoren was the first to speak, with a slight picky language in his language. "It's sunny, the data is well organized, it's quite detailed. but I think your conclusion is a bit conservative. The market predicts this piece, and it should be a little more prudent to highlight the competitive advantages of our products. What do you think? Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, but she didn't expect that he would directly find fault. She took a deep breath and responded calmly as she said, Howren, I understand what you mean, but I think data shows that the market's current acceptance of AI applications is still growing, and there may be risks beyond the prediction of view. My conclusion is based on a conservative estimate of existing data, which is more stable. Howren raised his eyebrows and smiled. It is a good thing to be stable, but sometimes, being stable means no breakthrough. Manager Zhang doesn't like to hear the word safety. What he wants is brilliant results. Think about it again and adjust his thinking. Although his temperament was relaxed, the pressure in his words made Xiaoqing feel a little uncomfortable. After the meeting ended, Xiaoqing returned to the workstation, feeling both angry and helpless. She knew Howren was deliberately provoking, but she also understood that his words were not completely unreasonable. Zhang Yifan is indeed a person who pursues results. If her report is too conservative, she may be really seen. She rubbed her son's hole and decided to work overtime tonight. She recrushed the data and tried to find a more convincing conclusion. As time goes by, the progress of AI projects is getting stronger and stronger. Xiaoqing works overtime until late at night almost every day, and the dark circles under her eyes are becoming more and more obvious. Zhang Yifan's requirements for her were getting higher and higher. He called her into the office from time to time and asked some questions that were so detailed that it made people's skin numb. His attitude is still cold and hard, but occasionally he will agree, which makes Xiaoqing both stressful and complex, feeling that is valued. In the evening of this day, Xiaoqing completed a set of data models and was about to be released to Zhang Yifan for review, but suddenly received an anonymous email. The email title is Beware of Your Boss, and the content is only a few short sentences. Zhang Yifan is not as simple as you think. There is a big problem behind the AI project, so don't trust him too much. After reading it, Xiaoqing was shocked and hurriedly checked the sender. She found that it was a random address that looked unintentional, which was obviously issued with a temporary account. She sat in her seat, and her brain formed a group. Who sent this email? Why remind her? What exactly does Zhang Yifan have? She remembered the facts and high level that Manlin had mentioned before, and the anxiety in her heart became stronger and stronger. She hesitated for a moment, and still deleted the email, telling herself not to think too much, but those few words were like thorns, piercing her heart, and she couldn't pull them off no matter how hard she was. When working overtime at night, Xiaoqing couldn't help but tell Manlin about this. She lowered her voice and was full of confusion. Sister Manlin, if someone anonymously reminds you that someone has a problem, what would you think? Should I believe it, or should I do that? After listening to it, Manlin's face changed and she was silent for a few seconds before she opened her mouth. Xiqing, there are many such things on the job field. Some people like to play tricks and challenge them. Don't believe it easily, but don't be completely unconscious. Zhang Yifan has some rumors, saying that he had happened to other companies in the past, and I don't know what it is. Be careful, but don't guess, so as not to cause trouble. It was a little clear and my heart was even more upset. She began to recall Zhang Yifan's words and deeds during his time. His indifference, his urgency, and even his occasionally tired eyes seemed to have hidden some unknown secrets. She told herself that it was not the time to think about these things, but the content of the email was like a shadow, always waving around her brain. A few days later, the AI project entered a key stage. Zhang Yifan called a full-scale meeting and announced that the project was about to enter internal evaluation, which would directly affect the company's high-level resource allocation to the department. His vocality is as strong as ever. This evaluation is not only an examination of the project, but also an examination of each of you. I don't care what method you use to come up with the best solution. If anyone drags his back, don't blame me for being rude. After the meeting ended, Xiaoqing returned to the workstation and her heart became more stressed. She knew that this was her chance to prove herself, but at the same time, she also felt that behind this project might be more complicated than she thought. She opened her computer and was ready to continue sorting out the data. She found that there was an additional file on the desktop, with the file name Internal Data Confidential. She was stunned for a moment and confirmed that she had not downloaded this thing. When she clicked on it, she found that there were all financial data about the AI project and lists of partners. Several of the names were Reddit, and there was also an explanation of potential risk next to it. Xiaoqing's heart beats faster and he quickly closed the file, and his brain was full of doubts. Who put this? Why did it appear on her computer? She remembered the anonymous email, and her anxiety in her heart magnified instantly. She knew that the file might involve something that she wouldn't know, but she knew that if it was discovered, she might be regarded as a scapegoat. She took a deep breath and decided to back up the file to her private cloud first, and then delete the traces on her computer. After doing this, she leaned against the back of the chair, her palms covered in sweat. She told herself that it was not a time to panic now, but her heart felt like she was being tightened by something and couldn't breathe. At this moment, Zhang Yifan's office door suddenly opened. He stood at the door, staring straight at Xiaoqing, and his voice was low. "Lin Xiaoqing, come in." Xiaoqing was shocked and stood up quickly, his brain was full of the files. She didn't know what Zhang Yifan was looking for her to fuck her, but she just told her that this conversation would probably not be simple. Xiaoqing felt like she was holding a rabbit in her heart, pounding, and she didn't dare to be suspicious about her steps, so she followed Zhang Yifan into his office. As soon as the door was closed, the air inside seemed to solidify. The lights in the office outside the glass partition cast several fine lights and shadows through the leaf windows, reflecting on Zhang Yifan's expressionless face, which looked particularly cold and hard. He sat on a black leather chair, with his hands crossed on the table, and his eyes behind the golden-framed lens were as sharp as if they could pierce people. Xiaoqing stood opposite him, even though she didn't dare to breathe. "Sit." Zhang Yifan's voice was low, and he could not hear joy or anger in his voice. Xiaoqing carefully pulled the chair and sat down, put her hands on her knees, and her palms were sweating. Her brain was in a mess, full of the contents of the Internal Data Confidential file just now. The reddish names and possible risks comments flashed before her like movie scenes. She forced herself to be calm and told herself not to show her brokenness, but her heartbeat was so loud that she felt it was harsh. Zhang Yifan pushed the glass, stared at her with his eyes intently, and said, "Lin Xiaoqing, I heard that your performance on the project has been good recently." By analyzing this section, Wang Haoran's group gave a positive response. His temperament was plain, but Xiaoqing always felt that there was something different in his words. She smiled reluctantly and said, "Thank you, Superintendent Zhang, I just tried my best to do my job." Yifan didn't answer her words, and was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly changed the topic. "Do you know that this AI project is not just a matter of our department, but the big bosses on it are very concerned? This project, with a hair moving all over the body, and a little problem, the consequences are not something you can bear." He put on his head, his eyes getting colder, "So I hope you understand that there are some things on the job field you should know, and you shouldn't know, it's best not to touch it." Xiaoqing felt nervous, and the file and the anonymous emails she received appeared in her brain. She didn't know if Zhang Yifan was talking about this or she knew something, so she could only reply with a stern look, "I understand, Supervisor Zhang, I'm just a newcomer, dedicated to doing my own thing and not coming." Her voice was as calm as possible, but the ending sound was still slightly slight. Zhang Yifan stared at her for a few seconds, as if he wanted to see something from her face, then clicked the head and waved his hand to signal her to leave. Xiaoqing stood up and felt her back was wet. When she walked out of the office, her legs were still a little soft. When she returned to the workstation, her brain was full of Zhang Yifan's words, and she became more and more uneasy. She began to wonder whether anyone deliberately set up a bureau, and the file and email were all implicated by her. "When I worked overtime until 11 o'clock in the evening, there were only a few lonely lights left in the office." Xiaoqing leaned on the back of the chair, rubbed the sun's hole, and tried to figure out the irritation of this group. She knew she couldn't sit there and wanted to figure out where this file came from, otherwise she wouldn't have the chance to explain it once she was regarded as a scapegoat. She hesitated for a moment, opened her private cloud and looked at the backup file again. The data and names swayed in front of her eyes, and each red annotation was like a regular blowout, which made her heart startled. At this moment, the mobile phone screen lit up. It was a message sent by Chen Manlin. Xiaoqing, haven't left yet? Do you have time to chat? Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, raised her head and looked around, and found that Manlin's workstation had been empty for a long time. It was probably under the floor when the message was sent. She hesitated for a moment and replied, "Okay, I'll get out right away." The coffee shop under the company building was still closed. Under the dim light, Chen Manlin sat by the window, holding a cup of hot tea in her hand. Seeing Xiaoqing walk over, she smiled at her. "I'm still working overtime this evening, I'm working hard." Xiaoqing smiled hard, sat down and ordered a cup of black coffee. Her language was filled with fatigue. "There is no way, the project progress is too tight. What is the focus of Supervisor Zhang?" Staring at it, Manlin asked casually, took a sip of tea, and asked casually, "I've been working smoothly recently, right? I heard that you and Wang Haoren's group have cooperated a lot. Are there anything unpleasant things?" She was relaxed, but there was a little exploration in her eyes. Xiaoqing felt a little moved and thought it was a good opportunity to try it out, so she unintentionally said, "Okay, it's just that it's very stressful. Sometimes I feel like I'm being rolled into something complicated, and I can't figure out the situation." Manlin raised her eyebrows and asked with a smile, "What a mess." "I'll listen to it, I'll help you participate." Xiaoqing hesitated for a moment, and decided to take a risk to try it out. She said in a low voice, "Sister Manlin, I have received some strange things recently, such as someone deliberately showed me some information that I shouldn't read. I don't know what to do, for fear that I'll be involved." After Manlin finished listening, her smile froze on her face, but soon returned to normal. She put down the teacup and said in a low voice, "Xiaoqing, there are many things on the job. Some people like to play tricks and challenge them. You shouldn't be too real, but don't be completely unconscious. If there is anything wrong with each other, remember to protect yourself, don't trust who or talk about it easily." She decided to do it and added, "As for the information you said, if it's not your responsibility, don't worry about it, so as not to cause trouble." It was a little clear and my heart was even more upset. Manlin sounded like she was helping her, but she also seemed to be trying too hard, and she didn't give any real suggestions. She picked up the coffee and took a sip, her tongue numbing, and she started calculating in her brain. Did Manlin know something, but she just didn't say it on purpose? In the next few days, Xiaoqing became more careful and did not dare to have any mahu at work. At the same time, he secretly observed the people around him. She found that Wang Haoren has been very close to some people in the technical department recently, and no matter how often she mentioned cross-departmental cooperation, her language was full of pride. Zhang Yifan became more and more silent, often keeping himself in the office, and occasionally his face was shocking. Xiaoqing thought that the stone behind the project was being curled, and she was probably the person who was most likely to be rolled in. That night, the internal evaluation report of the AI project was finally submitted, and Xiaoqing and Wang Haoren's group were called into the conference room together, and Zhang Yifan hosted it. His face was colder than usual, and his language felt unquestionable pressure. "The results of this report directly determine the status of our department in the high-level eyes. I don't care what method you use to ensure that data and conclusions are indecisive. If there is any problem, don't blame me for turning my face." Xiaoqing sat in the corner, her heart was both tight and looking forward to it. She knew that most of her efforts were in this report, and that part of the data analysis was almost done by her, and if she could be recognized, she might be able to stand firm in the department. Wang Haoren had a light face and kept talking to the people beside him, as if he didn't take this meeting seriously at all. After the report began, the part that Xiaoqing was responsible for was recognized by Zhang Yifan. He even said rarely, "Lin Xiaoqing, this part of the analysis has been done well and has grasped the key points." Xiaoqing was happy and felt that the hard work these days was not in vain. However, when the report came to the market forecast that Wang Haoren was responsible for, the problem came. Zhang Yifan suddenly stopped and his language became unusually sharp. Howren, what is the source of this data? Conclusion, why is this so happy? The market acceptance is still in its growth stage. What do you think we can directly occupy half of the amount? Wang Howren was stunned for a moment, and his confidence on his face instantly collapsed a little. He reluctantly explained, Super Zhang, this is based on the latest model prediction of the technology department. They said that the product performance has breakthroughs, so I. Before he finished speaking, Zhang Yifan coldly interrupted, the model of the technology department is their business. What our marketing department wants is real data, not empty checks. Do you want this conclusion to be viewed with a high-level view? Do you want our department to become a joke? The atmosphere in the conference room instantly dropped to the ice point. I looked at the notebook in my hand with a low head, and felt a little relieved. She knew that Wang Howren had kicked the iron board this time, but at the same time, she also realized that this meeting might just be the prelude to the storm. Sure enough, after the meeting ended, Zhang Yifan left Wang Howren alone. The two of them discussed the sound of the conflict coming from nearly an hour in the office when they passed by the outside of the glass partition for about an hour. That night, Xiaoqing worked overtime until very late. Just as she was about to turn off her computer, her phone suddenly received an anonymous message, "Don't think you can hide the file." Zhang Yifan has already started to be suspicious. After Xiaoqing finished reading, her palms suddenly sweated. She looked around and saw that there was no one in the office, only the low voice of the air was clattering in her ears. She knew that this time she was really targeted. In the next week, Xiaoqing was worried almost every day. She began to doubt everyone around her, and even Manlin's kind reminder made her feel that she was not purposeful. Zhang Yifan's attitude towards her became even colder, and he often asked her to go to the office to ask some detailed questions, as if he was deliberately trying her reaction. Xiaoqing knew what she had to do, otherwise she would have been swallowed up by this storm. At noon this day, she plucked up her courage and arranged for Manlin to chat in the park near the company. Sunlight passed through the leaves and was on the bench, and Xiaoqing said in a low voice, "Sister Manlin, I know there are some things you may not want to say, but I really have no choice. I received some things, maybe the confidential information of the project. I don't know who posted them, but I'm afraid I will be regarded as a scapegoat. Can you help me?" After hearing this, Manlin was silent for a few seconds, then sighed and said in a low voice, "Xiqing, I have told you a long time ago, don't touch some things. Since you have already been brought in, I'll just say it." Zhang Yifan, a man who had happened to another company in the past, heard that it was because he was involved in business secret leaks and almost went to jail. After he came to Xinchen Technology, he always wanted to prove himself, so he was particularly obsessed with the AI project. Someone in your hand might have deliberately given you the purpose of conflicting with you and Zhang Yifan. After hearing this, Yu Qing was shocked and couldn't help asking, "Then what should I do?" If Zhang Yifan really thought it was me, it would be useless for me to explain it. Manlin shook his head, and his words were helpless. "What you can do now is hand over the things, be honest and say you don't know where to go, and then leave this farther away from the drama." Although Zhang Yifan is cold, he will not be unreasonable. The more you hide it, the more likely you are to be suspicious. It's sunny and my heart is still up and down. She knew that Manlin had a reasonable point and could hand over the file, and she was not so irrelevant to push herself to the forefront. She hesitated all day, and finally, when she was working overtime at night, she plucked up her courage and opened Zhang Yifan's office door. "Come in." Zhang Yifan's voice was as cold as ever. Xiaoqing pushed the door in and saw him looking down at a document without even raising his head. She took a deep breath and opened her mouth. "Super Zhang, I have something I want to tell you. I recently found a file on my computer. The content seemed to be confidential information of the project. I don't know who posted it, but I didn't move it and deleted it after I made a backup. I was afraid that there would be any mistakes in this matter, so I wanted to confess to you." After Zhang Yifan finished listening, he finally raised his head, and a slight flashed in his eyes, but he quickly returned to calmness. He pushed the lens and asked in a calm manner, "Are you sure you haven't moved? Have you never told anyone?" Xiaoqing was slightly slapped, her palms were covered in sweat. I'm sure, I just made a backup, afraid that I would be misled, but I didn't show anyone. Yifan was silent for a few seconds, then pointed, okay, I understand. I will deal with this. You go back to work, don't talk too much. Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment. Unexpectedly, he reacted so dull, but he didn't dare to ask too much, so he hurriedly left the office. However, this incident did not end there. A few days later, news suddenly came out of the company, and Zhang Yifan was called to ask by the high-level team, saying that it was because of the leak of the information of the AI project partner, which caused the company to lose a large order. When Xiaoqing heard the news, her heart sank. She knew that this might have something to do with the file she handed over. Sure enough, that afternoon, Zhang Yifan was officially suspended from his post and said that he wanted to cooperate with internal investigations, and the department's supervisor position was temporarily replaced by another manager. Xiaoqing sat in the workstation, and her brain formed a group. She didn't expect things to develop this way, and Zhang Yifan's departure made her feel relaxed and a little guilty. She began to recall everything that had been in the past few months, from her first day of stepping into star technology to her power struggle. She seemed to have never really controlled her own destiny. In the evening, Xiaoqing stood in front of the glass door of the company building, looking at the sunset in the sky, and felt mixed emotions. When Zhang Yifan left, she saw him at the elevator. He was wearing a dark coat, his face was pale, and his eyes were filled with fatigue and unwillingness. As he passed by her, he stopped and said in a low voice, Lin Xiaoqing, the job is not as simple as you think. Learning will protect yourself. After speaking, he walked into the night without looking back, and his back looked particularly lonely. Xiaoqing watched him disappear at the corner of the street, and her heart was filled with scent. She knew that this scene was not completely past, and the factional battles and power games in the company might just kick off. And how could she, a small marketing assistant, find her own foothold in this undercurrent career? She took a deep breath and turned back to the building. Her pace was more stable and heavier than before.